Hey everyone, I'm Angela Lynn.
And I'm Jesse Lynn, and welcome back to another episode of But Where Are You Really From? This week, we are bringing you a live, unscripted discussion on our episode. And what we're going to be talking about is student loans. So, we originally already had this as a topic, but given the new news around the federal forgiveness of student loans up to a certain amount, we thought it'd be really interesting discussion just to kind of like ping pong back and forth how we each feel about it. Is it too generous? Is it not generous enough? Do we have objections to certain ways that it's being fulfilled? So that's what we wanted to discuss this week.
We're going to keep this to a mini because we did talk about like higher education in a long form discussion in a previous episode. So if you're interested in those thoughts, go back to that episode. But this is just a quickie based on the new news that just came out. Just see what are your thoughts? I think I have different thoughts from you. So
Yeah, I mean, okay, so I think on the surface level, for anyone that has paid off their student loans, I have paid off my student loans. It kind of stings a little bit because you're kind of like, well, that sucks. Like, why didn't I just be like, paying off the loans like slowly and then just having it forgiven? And it kind of feels a little bit kind of like a slap in the face for the people who were able to pay off the loans, but were not particularly financially like well off. Like, I wasn't making a lot of money after college, and I know my parents paid for some of it, but I still had a good amount of loans. Out of graduation, I was making like 40,000 the first year, 45 the next, and maybe like 50 the third. So it wasn't like I had a ton of money and I was living in New York. So that out of the way, because of course everyone has nasty feelings about something like this. Like I have a lot of friends who are still struggling with stuff like that, and from that perspective, I'm happy for them because I know how difficult it was because I was trying to pay all of them off and I successfully did so. But like I can see the struggle for a lot of people, and it feels good that people I know don't have to go through that. So it's like from a feelings perspective, there's like two balances where it's like kind of like, oh well, that kind of sucks because like I put myself through a little bit more than I had to pay them off. It almost feels kind of like, oh, like why did I try so hard to pay them off? It was going to be forgiven like later on. But on the other hand, like I do see some of my friends who struggle with student loans and like paying off their education. And I'm kind of like, that's really good for you. Like I feel like it's a nice thing that you're getting. And something to take like more worries off of your plate.
yeah, actually, I don't think we have as different views.
Uh,
I thought you were gonna be like, yeah, like
well,
all for
I
it.
am. I'm happy for my friends. I'm also, but like, if you paid off your loans and you're like, I'm only happy, I think you're lying. Like, nobody is happy to pay something off that they might have gone for free. Like,
Agreed. Well, yeah, I have a lot of mixed, mostly mixed into negative feelings towards this announcement. Like you, it feels like a slap in the face because, like you said, we both struggled pretty hard to be able to pay off our student loans. It was not a quick, like, snap of the finger, trust fund paid it off kind of bullshit. Well, if you had a trust fund, you didn't have to take out loans to begin with, right? But, like, there was nobody paying off our debt for us. And so I made around the same money as you coming out of college too, like those low 40s, which in New York means paycheck to paycheck. It was not easy to pay off that loan. And then I took a second loan, which was substantially higher than my undergrad loan to do my master's. And I only paid that off like a few years ago. So, and I like scraped and scrimped, even though I was making a much higher salary out of business school. I took on a much higher debt to go back to school. So it is like a slap in the face. There are also just like a lot of technicalities that I don't know that everyone who like hears this announcement is really paying attention to. So like first of all, you mentioned this in how you described it, which I thought was important. You said federal loans because anyone who hears like the government's going to pay off everyone's student loans just like at face value sounds like, "Oh my god, wow, like you're going to be helping so many people." But realistically, the federal government is a big loan provider, but it is not the only loan provider out there. And if you really needed loans, like a lot of loans, you probably couldn't get by just borrowing from the government because there are caps for how much money that they lent out. And then especially if you took like master's and beyond education, the government gave zero shits about you. Like, my interest rates were incredibly high to borrow from the federal government as a master's student. So I ended up refinancing. So if anyone refinanced their loans, even if you took out initially a government loan and you decide to go to like SoFi, all those
Mm.
other private lenders to refinance to get a better, lower interest rate, you wouldn't qualify because you're
Mm.
no longer a federal loan borrower. So it was like a double slap in my face to hear that, because it was like, okay, so I was trying to get myself into a better position to not pay 10% interest to the government for no reason when I could pay 3.5 interest to a private lender. But because of that qualification, I wouldn't have qualified anyway, even if I, had gone slower with my repayment. And in fact, I paid off my loan, so I don't qualify at all. So there's like all these things. So, number one, if you didn't borrow from the government or you ended up borrowing mixed with private lenders or you refinanced, you wouldn't even necessarily qualify for this amount of money. So it doesn't matter. Other things is like, I read, so to be fair, this is like hot, right? Like, we had a guest kind of cancel slash reschedule last minute, so we're literally just like talking about this right now. But
Off book, off script.
totally. But I saw a headline this morning that said something about, like, I think it was CNBC, and it said that on average, all taxpayers are going to be foot with a $2,000 extra bill essentially to pay for these loan forgiveness program thingies that they're doing right now. And that pisses me off because I'm like, you know how much money they already extract from us in taxes and like misuse in so many ways. I'm like, even if you felt like this was like a super worthy cause to spend money towards, can you not carve out like some money that you would have otherwise given to, I don't know, the military or like somewhere else that you're just like bloated, instead of making us pay even more money, especially the people like us who already paid off our own debt, and now we're going to be slapped with essentially more debt, other people's debt. Like, that like pissed me off to see that it wasn't
Yeah.
even like we carved out existing budget to go here. It's like, we're going to raise more money from you to pay for it.
No, I agree with you in that perspective. And I think a lot of people have been pointing at the general budgetary splitting in the government and being like, why are we spending, like, your example is great. Why are we spending so much on our military? Like, I understand we have to like maintain a certain show of force, but like the budget for the military goes up every year. I don't think our military increases that much by every year. And like we've wound down operations in a lot of places that we had a lot of troops. So like we shouldn't be increasing the budget there. It's definitely this tension because like I said, I'm really happy for everyone who is struggling that I know is getting student loan forgiveness. And like that for me is actually a good use of my taxpayer money. But it's kind of the point you're saying, like, why is it extra money that is being paid into this as opposed to like money coming from other parts of the government that like do not directly benefit anyone I know or a cause I'm interested in. And I also feel like it's just so one off, like it's kind of like a band aid on top of a problem and it doesn't really address the problem. And so, like, really, there's only a small set of one time beneficiaries from this. And so it's kind of like, well, that's great, but like we don't want to forget the problem that created this originally, which is like predatory student loans, shitty colleges that didn't produce graduates that could find jobs, colleges that are just way too expensive to begin with no limitations to how much they could charge for each student. So like none of these problems are being addressed, which does not fix like the issue of student loans. It's just kind of like this like one-time band-aid that helps a select swath of the population, but anyone else going to college now is not going to be benefiting from this. And like it's going to be worse for them. Like I feel like we did this analysis in college that's basically like how much has college increased like every single year for a 4-year college, and it's always increased every single year. So it's like it's just like these select people who are in debt right now that are helped, but then kind of everyone else is still long-term screwed. I think it's a nice thing for everyone who's getting it, but almost like what are you doing to fix the problem? Because like this band-aid costs everybody money and it doesn't put the people who are responsible for creating this debt, which like in part is like people taking on the debt, but it's also like a lot of these situations where like it was predatory lending and like schools misrepresenting what they could give to the student. So like, why aren't those people in trouble? Like, why aren't they paying for it? Like, they caused the problem. So that's the part where I'm also kind of like, you're not fully putting people who are accountable for the issue. And it's kind of like, well, it's up to the taxpaying public to cover the issue of like for-profit education and like even non-for-profit education providers like taking advantage of loans and stuff like that and like inflating their costs and things like that. So it's just like I like this, but like, can we fix like the real problem here?
I could not agree more with everything that you just said. That was like the other main qualm I had with all of this was just like, this is literally just so that you guys look good before the election, because this does not help anyone in the long run. First, I'm going to put aside what you said about the like expensive colleges and the broken system to begin with. The other piece is like, $10,000 is not that much money, honestly, in the grand scheme of like how much debt most people have to take on. I think the last time I saw any like average number of student loan debt was a hot second ago, but I believe it was around 40,000 was kind of like average, right? But like if you went to a private college or master's program and you had to take out like fully loans, you would have a six-figure debt. $100,000
Yeah.
plus of debt, getting $10,000 off is nothing because you've accrued interest during all this time. And if you really are not making a good salary, then you've barely chipped away at any of that. You probably have even more owed right now than like you took out, you know what I mean, even with paying back gradually over time. So it's just kind of like, number one, this doesn't even mean anything because $10,000 is not going to make a significant difference for people who are really, really struggling with their student loan repayment. And then number two, to your point, it's just like, literally this is nothing for like fixing the actual problem. And Ramon made a good point when he first read these headlines. He was like, you know what this is going to do? Guess what? All those colleges are just going to raise their tuition by $10,000 to like match what was given, because now it's like, oh well, we'll just make it up because it's free money.
Yeah, for sure they have to like rein in that piece of it. And they can because they offer loans to the school. Like that's not an insignificant part of the money that the school is getting. Like the money is coming from the government. They should be able to use that money to be like, you cannot raise the price in this manner unless you can justify why you're raising the price in this manner. So that is definitely one of the things where I'm kind of like, that student debt is a huge amount of money, which means it's a huge amount of leverage that the government can be like, no, 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 no money for you unless you can prove to us like why your educational costs are going up every year. So that's one of the things. I'm happy this is happening for everyone, but I also don't want it to become like, oh, we like gave you this forgiveness and now we're not going to do anything else about what is happening. I will say, like, I think there are a few other things that they're doing. I think they're delaying repayment for the last time on student debt until the end of the year. And they're doing some, I believe there's like an income-based repayment max now. It's like 5% of your discretionary income. So there are some like additional guardrails in place to try to like help people manage their debt a little bit better. So it's like not such a crushing thing for them. $10,000 is not a lot in the grand scheme of things. It's not nothing though. So I'm like, it's like, it's something. But I also just like, same thing as you're saying, like, I just don't think that we want to like do this and then forget that there's still this like huge educational, like complex thing that is like eating people's money. And let's face it, at this point, it's almost kind of just like a mandatory thing as opposed to like added value. Like you're just kind of going to school because you have to at this point because everybody has a bachelor's degree. And so when that becomes like the baseline, you have no choice. You have to get it somehow. I think it's predatory in a sense because you're forced to participate in this thing in order to find a job in certain industries.
So TLDR, happy for the select few people who actually benefit from this.
Very truly, like I'm very happy for my
Yes.
friends. I'm not, and I'm not in any way saying that like they should not benefit from this or like this is not good for them. Like I'm very happy for all the people who are benefiting.
It's happening either way, so I'm not unhappy for those people. So I'm happy that's the select few. I'm choosing those words carefully. It is a select few. It just really is not representative of like a large number of people in the grand scheme of people who've taken out debt. So that's really what I mean is like happy for y'all, but you aren't even that many people. So if this was going to be this big gesture, it just like isn't even that big of a gesture to BH. But let's focus on fixing the actual problem, which is the crazy system we have set up for just just milking young people for all they're worth to get baseline education to be taken seriously for employment.
Yeah, and honestly, I've said this before, but I think that at least for me, I think it just really starts with like showing people the options that they have when they're in that age range where they're deciding on what they want to do. Because there have been a lot of times where I'm like, why didn't I do a trade? Like, I don't think it would have been as expensive. And to be honest, like trade stuff is always like you're always gonna need like electrician, plumber, like electrical engineers. Like these are people who will always also have jobs, but you don't necessarily have to go through like a 4-year liberal arts school to learn all of those skills. So like I think it also is just about emphasizing that education is much more than this 4-year liberal arts program. It's like it could be a trade, it could be anything else that's like adding value. And I think that overall everyone needs to do like a much better job of being like you have all these different options as opposed to like you must go to this and you must do this.
Well, those were our thoughts. So let us know what you guys think. Let us know in the comments wherever you're watching this. We want to hear what your hot takes are because this is pretty fresh, and I think people are surprisingly more split on it than you'd think they'd be, given that it's spun as
It's a
something,
gamut. Some people are like it's not enough.
Yeah.
Other people are like this is great. It's like a big range. Yeah.
Yeah. So let us know what you think. And come back next week because we'll have another fresh episode for you then. And until then, say
Bye,
chin,
Jen,
bitches.
bitches.